Hi, we are continuing with the reading of Esoteric Psychology by Alice A. Bailey, her teachings about the seven rays and how these seven energy centers basically influence and break down each human form, each human being, each solar expression that we are in form. So kind of a recap on the forward, one of the main things that I highlighted was the intention of the author, who is the Tibetan or the entity, master, or mentor that Alice A. Bailey telepathically wrote out this book and her teachings through intuiting these messages. And then verifying them obviously through life work and theosophical practices, which is the study and integration of many different modalities of the ancient teachings and wisdoms, religions from way, way back, Hinduism, for example, and combining them for the fruit and not the dogma or the control factor. So again, anyways, the summary of the intentions that the author embedded into these writings was first to instruct with the most speed possible. Second, to increase the mental competency of the aspirant or student or mentee who reads the teachings. And third, to assemble a group of earnest, sincere, and responsible aspirants to unfold the plan of the great ones. The great ones, again, being the masters or the mentors, the teachers who already went through their enlightenment process to evolve mentally, spiritually into the fourth kingdom, the realm that's not of this dual competitive nature, bringing forth a new kind of psychology or thinking. And that is what we have so far outlined as to the plan of the great ones. The plan is to bring forth a new type of psychology in which we have unity consciousness, Christed consciousness. I'll continue on in chapter 1, the introductory remarks about why we should study the seven rays. It says that we are going to throw light on the cycles of history, which are evolution as humankind, it says, or of all species, of all kingdoms, is an evolution of consciousness. And you can look back at different benchmark times in history where there's been a progression of man from the stage of caveman to the perfected Son of God, which is that Christed consciousness, again, that unity consciousness that we're striving for, awakening and unleashing human potential, as Stephen Covey used to say. The second use or reason for studying this is to clarify our knowledge of the nature of men by adding to modern psychology, esoteric psychology, which deals with the soul and acknowledges the spiritual aspect of ourselves and not just the mental aspect of ourselves. So this is where it talks about how modern psychology can fall short in the treatment of a person by looking at only the mental implications of what could have created their condition and not studying the spiritual or solar aspects of what could be occurring to them. For example, I had a recommendation in my YouTube feed of an 18-year-old girl who was said to be in a catatonic schizophrenic. And this was very old. It's black and white. She sat there in the chair like this, barely blinking, and going through an interview about how she turned herself into a mental institution because one day she realized that she was afraid of everyone, had an unwarranted fear, and her self was split into two. She said she felt like she was one person at work and another person at home. These are things that don't really indicate a psychosis, right? This happens like in everyday life, for example. But in the modern psychology or the psychology of the day, they had her sitting there interviewing her. And mind you, although she's stoic and in this catatonic state, because she felt like every time she moved, all eyes would be on her and people would be watching her and not liking her and judging her. Again, these things that you can like, this doesn't mean you're a catatonic schizophrenic, but at the time that's what it meant. And this is the example of how Bailey and these teachings say that psychology and its without cognizance of the solar self, falls short, because although she was in this state and she was in this hospital, as the interviewer asked her questions, she was just flowing with such an awareness of self and such clarity as she spoke and articulated everything that was going on with her. I was like, this is not a crazy person. But she was labeled as such because we didn't understand what could be plaguing her on a spiritual level that she needed to unlock or integrate or understand with these energetic forces that were kind of infringing on her psyche that she wasn't used to. And all of a sudden she was bombarded and she didn't understand it. And so anyways, studying the seven rays, for example, Alice A. Bailey says, can clarify our knowledge of our nature, which is not just mental, but it's also spiritual and non-physical as well. And that there's energies that also inform our personalities, be it the planets, be it when we get into all of that. And that's why looking into those other videos that I had just posted on, say, the Scorpio, Pluto and Scorpio generation, where a generation of people are actually under the influence of certain, well, every person has a generation that they had this influence and how it plays out in our lifetime. And it's very interesting through the ages. So this study helps us throw light on the cycles of history and how those kinds of things actually do impact us, clarifying human nature as being not just mental, but also solar, spiritual. And then the last thing was giving us a practical method to analyze and understand ourselves as these ensouling entities, understanding that we have psychic intuitive gifts, understanding that we have a feminine and masculine nature, and that our feminine nature has been put to sleep or subdued because that's where our creative power actually lies, our spiritual faculties and forces to actually affect change on our environment rather than to be dictated by that left brain dominated way that we've been indoctrinated into this reality. And then B, to have a wiser comprehension of our fellow man. And I liked that it highlighted that we can understand more the different opportunities and limitations of other people, their vocational aptitudes, the way that they can best serve, and their true values and their strengths, and how that correlates with astrology and actually looking at a birth chart. Of course, that's not the end-all be-all of who a person is, but it is the blueprint of how they were born into this reality. It's the raw stuff of which builds up our character and our tendencies, just like with psychology, and you look at someone's environment, nature versus nurture, and you look at their blueprint of how they physically, from a very physical standpoint, are written out to be a certain way. It doesn't just end there, it goes into the spiritual aspect to look at their solar makeup. So what does your birth chart actually say that contributes to these tendencies that will then be like triggered or activated by your upbringing and your environment? And then let's learn how to then better, wiser comprehend that person and release them from these said psychoses and say, oh no, okay, you're just actually living from your south node, for example, and your work from this blueprint is that you're supposed to be living from your north node, which is XYZ from your birth chart, which means that you will start to see less, obstacles or oppression in your life if you stop. Just learning how to navigate things better and tell someone, okay, well, maybe your aptitude is here, or this is where your strengths are, this is where, just things like that. And you just become more aware holistically from that understanding. I took 10 minutes for that introduction, so my apologies. I'm going to go ahead and get into reading. This part is pretty interesting. It's part 2 of the Introductory Remarks. Again, chapter 1, where we're learning about life, quality, and appearance. Okay, part 2, life, quality, appearance. In our study of the rays, it must therefore be remembered that we are dealing with life expression through the medium of matter form. The highest unity will be cognized only when this dual relation is perfected. The theory of the one life may be held, but I deal not basically with theory, but with that which may be known, provided there is growth and intelligent application of truth. I deal with possibility and with that which is capable of achievement. Many these days like to talk and think in terms of that one life, but it remains but speech and thought, whilst the true awareness of that essential unity remains a dream and an imagining. Whenever this reality is put into words, duality is emphasized, and the spiritual controversy, using the word in its basic meaning and not in its ordinary warlike connotation, is enhanced. Take, for example, the words, I believe in the one life. These are in quotes, like someone's quoting this. I believe in the one life. Or, to me, there is but one reality. And note how they are in their phraseology and expression of duality. So this first section here is just kind of calling the bluff of a lot of people who state that they have an understanding of the one life, that we're trying to get to, that unity consciousness, because it says that many people like to talk in terms of the one life, or like the unity consciousness, where we talk about new age or spiritual people, when you have this kind of air of, oh yeah, we're so united and we're all peace and love and harmony, yet the true awareness of it is really just a dream or an imagining, because they don't understand how they still segment themselves off from other people based on, there's this reverse judgment, like for example, like non-spiritual people, scientists versus spiritualists, where it gets to in here that there actually should not be a distinction between logical, mental psychology and this esoteric psychology should actually be made at one, which, just like in all things, take away that duality, just understand it as truth. This is the truth, the true nature of mankind, as he is both mental and he is also spiritual. There is no distinction. So a lot of times there's a trap in that spiritual community in which we act like we have this apprehension, understanding of oneness and unity, when really we still think ourselves other and separate or greater than or less than another being. And that's not unity consciousness. That's kind of, it's a dream and an imagining, but not a real understanding. And so in these two examples that it says, these sentences that a person would say, I believe in the one life. I believe in it as a thing, which means that there's something other than that. So that's how he says that phrase indicates a duality in and of itself. Or to say, to me, there is but one reality. That distinction, that to me, so that creates this other. Whereas for others, I understand that they might not have that. But to really grasp the one life or the unity would be to drop away this sense of any other possibility. There is no other way other than unity. There is no other consciousness other than the consciousness that we all come from the same source. There is no other awareness other than the fact that I understand that I am in you and you are in me, and your actions affect me and my actions affect you. And there's no way around that, okay? So there's a warning here that it gives of this false apprehension of the true one life. Life cannot be expressed in words, nor can it realize perfection. Excuse me. Nor can it realize perfection. The process of becoming, which leads to being, is a cosmic event involving all forms, and no Son of God lies separated from that mutable process as yet. We all first have to get to this breaking down state, this breaking down of this identity with solely just the form self, our human being, our name, our identity, our roles, and things that we play out and that we've learned, our observed and inherited behavior. We all go through the career of the monad, which it explains in the last section, where first you have this complete unawareness of soul, of your solar self. You're astrologically influenced self. You are just your form. You are just this human being. You're nothing more. There's no observer. You can even choose in this society. Do I believe in God? Do I believe in religion? That's this duality nature. Oh, I can pick and choose. Not that there's just one truth irrespective of your beliefs and your thoughts. That's like, do I believe in myself? I am God force. No, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in myself, is what we're saying. This is to dissipate all that. So the career, that's the first step, is this complete ignorance of it. Second step, where it's a differentiation, is distinguish that, oh my gosh, I'm teetering on the sides. I'm aware that maybe what I do does matter and impact other people. What if there is a silent observer, which is karma, which is deity, which is, sometimes people think of then they start to think in terms of spirituality, the afterlife. Maybe I'm going to be punished for my actions by someone who sees what I'm doing, but not now, We get a little bit more evolved in the third level of the monadic career, where we understand that we are the observer and the experiencer, and that there are universal laws in place, and that we do receive penance, and the bill does come due for our thoughts and actions. And yes, our actions do affect another. And through our birth chart, we might see that in a past life, maybe I have acted in a certain way that built me into this life where I am experiencing certain obstacles, whereas someone else might be experiencing certain gifts because they did certain things, or they harmonized, or they walked in line. Even if you don't believe in past life and all that stuff, in this current life, we live many lives within one lifetime. If a person is, for example, like I said, with the North Node, South Node, if a person is living into their North Node, they have less roadblocks. They're walking their path. Whereas if you're still living as the self that you're supposed to be evolving from, then you're going to have tons and tons of bumps in the road. Your journey will not be as smooth. So these things that we understand as we understand the self, and we go through the career of the monad. And it says that many lifetimes, going back to that concept, are spent in that second stage, that second career, where you're just actually teeter-tottering back and forth between this awareness of just your form self, and then you have your awareness of your non-physical self too. And third is it says here, the higher realization of unity follows upon this sense of duality. It's the final stage in where the sense of the being a soul and a body is lost. Consciousness identifies itself with the indwelling life of the planet and the solar system. When this happens, there is a registering of a state of being which lies beyond word, mind, and form expression of any kind. This I am that I am. But moving back into this part. So I think that was really cool how it explains that we need to check ourselves, right? If we think we're being all peace, love, and kindness and unity, but we're saying, but only for these people. Or I only have an open heart as it relates to this group. Or I only have a sense of understanding and acceptance of information that comes from this segment. If it's not on Channel 9 News, for example, I reject it. If it doesn't come from someone in a white coat, I reject it. If it hasn't been tested in a laboratory, then it cannot heal me. I'm speaking in those terms, but it definitely is so much broader than, physical things. But this is the way we kind of segment ourselves sometimes into a locked form of thinking, even when we think that we're open. Continuing on. So again, yes, no one can escape this process of becoming that leads to being. Once you become aware of the self, then you can learn to live as the self, which is the soul. The quote from the other part of the introduction, the more truly you live as a soul, the more surely you will comprehend that which may be imparted in these teachings, for example. The more you live as a soul, the more you can understand what this is talking about. The process of becoming, which leads to being, is a cosmic event involving all forms, all humans, all beings, all animals, and no son of God lies separated from that mutable process as yet. As long as he is in form, he cannot know what life is, though when he has attained certain steps and can function on the higher planes of the system in full awareness, when you awaken within the dream, he can begin to glimpse that awful reality. Certain great initiates down the ages have fulfilled their function of revealers and have held before the eyes of the pioneering disciple of life the ideal of oneness and of unity. It has nevertheless been a matter of shifting the focus of attention progressively out of one form into another, and thus, from a higher standpoint, getting a fresh glimpse of a possible truth. Each age, and the present is no exception, has believed its grasp of reality and its sensitivity to the inner beauty to be greater and nearer the true than was ever previously possible. And this goes back to how it says that we can study through the ages. So in this age, the information age, we think we are more aware of self than, say, the Stone Age, right? More aware of the self, of our divinity, of our capacity. We can fly in a plane. They could only, chisel a rock. There's evolution, yet we still have further to go in our evolution, meaning our conscious evolution based on these teachings. But yet we still believe that we're further along than those before us. The highest realization of what is termed the one life is the awareness of the initiative high degree of the embodied logos of deity and his identification with the consciousness of that stupendous creator who is seeking expression through the medium of the solar system. No initiate on the planet can identify himself with the consciousness of that identified being, in the esoteric sense of the term, who, speaking in the Bhagavad Gita, says, "Having pervaded the entire universe with a fragment of myself, I remain." So it says, although the goal is comprehension of the one, the unity, the oneness of us, the idea that we are that divine creator, we cannot identify with that creator as yet because it creates the sense of, well, we'll get into that. But the truth is that we can identify with the embodied logos or deity, which pervaded the entire universe with fragments of itself and still remains. So to be so powerful that you can split yourself off into every single thing imaginable through the tangible universe, to be within every leaf and every rock and every human and every animal, and yet to still be fully yourself, is that omnipresent awareness, that omnipresent consciousness. And that's where people get a little bit jaded about, religion. But that's consciousness. Period. That's what consciousness is. There's consciousness in a stone, there's consciousness in a human, there's consciousness in a dog, and it's all playing out. Actually gets into that too, so I'll continue. These thoughts I commend to your consideration and to your careful pondering, begging you to see to it that there is a steady expansion of your sense of awareness. Steadily. You don't have to get it all in a day, but start to slowly apprehend that you are one and the same with that essence that divided itself up into all of these expressions. Okay? And when you tap into that oneness, you unlock, give rise to the integration of your psyche, the left brain, right brain, and you can become that creator being in your own expression of life in this fragmented version, because that's what that creator sought to do, was to express through your unique perspective. But you were locked off from that creator being and made to be just a servant being. And so you did not know what you did not know. So these thoughts I commend to your consideration and to your careful pondering, begging you to see to it that there is a steady expansion of your sense of awareness and a growing capacity to make understanding contacts with that emerging truth, reality, and beauty which the universe declares. However, a warning: guard yourself at the same time from mystical rhapsodies anent the one life, which are apt to be no more than the negation of all mental apprehension and a luxuriating in the sensuous perception of a highly developed and high-grade emotional nature. What does that mean? It's important because it says We need to guard ourselves against this. So to break it down, guard yourself against mystical rhapsodies. So the mystical, the mystic, the occult, the spiritual rhapsodies, and like a zealous excitement to be wrapped up in this fervor, this emotional excitement about this one life, that we are. Guard yourself from being swept up in that, which is apt to be no more than the negation of all mental apprehension. So it goes back to that duality, that dual nature that we need to become one with. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, like it says. You don't throw out all of your mental understanding of how to navigate this physical plane. You don't throw that out as you learn that you are a spiritual being, that you have this spiritual life. You don't surrender to saying, oh, well, it's all observed and created and set out before me. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to take action of any kind. It's all just this woo-woo, airy-fairy land where, oh, everything's one and there's no problems in the world, right? So then you start to become ignorant of everything that's going on around you. You still keep that mental apprehension. You don't negate it or undo it and luxuriate to be kind of indulgent, to be just kind of like sitting fat and happy in this sensual perception, it says, of a highly developed and high-grade emotional nature where I am God, and you just really haven't really got there yet. So guard yourself against spiritual arrogance and against mental ignorance of who you are as a spiritual being. Stay centered, stay balanced in both. Right? All our considerations, therefore, in this treatise on the seven rays, will necessarily be held within the realm of thought which involves awareness of duality. I shall employ the language of duality, and this I shall do, not because I seek to emphasize it to the neglect of unity, for this unity is to me somewhat of a reality, and I glimpse more than a possibility, but because all aspirants and disciples and all initiates up to the third initiation, as I earlier said, are swinging as a pendulum between the pairs of opposites, spirit and matter. Like we said, they're in that second stage of the monadic career where they're bouncing back between, some days I recognize that I'm a divine being worth taking myself seriously, and then being just this matter form where I should just live a sensuous life, where I should just, not care about, just be reckless, right? I'm not a spirit being. I'm just a man, and nothing matters, right? So he says that for this reason he speaks in terms of duality, not because it doesn't understand that oneness is a reality, because these masters have unlocked and enlightened their awareness to have a glimpse of it. It says that we can't in our physical forms fully apprehend it, but we can have the privilege of a glimpse of it if we work to steady our minds and focus in the light, which is our crown, our anointed self, our Christed consciousness potential, or potential for Christed consciousness, So, for this reason he speaks in terms of duality. I speak not here of the pairs of opposites of the astral or emotional plane, which are illusory reflections of the true pairs of opposites, but of the basic duality of manifestation. I seek to deal with that material which is of practical value and which can be grasped by the illumined intelligence of the average man. It is necessary for all students who seek illumination and a right apprehension of truth to drop the emphasis so often laid upon certain aspects and presentations of truth being spiritual and others being mental. Again, here's that distinction. Stop dividing this truth and this information, because that's what we've been conditioned to do, to put our right brain to sleep, the feminine, put the power of feminine energy to sleep, which is your creator being, your life force, your emotional nature, which is really just your ability to intuit and to comprehend that which is not seen in front of you, and to only revere and respect that which is of the left brain, logical, reasonable, seen, physical, tangible, put in black and white, right? Integrate both. Gross. Integrate both, right? Integrate both. going to say it again and again. It's not just spiritual and it's not just mental. There aren't just scientists out here with credibility, and there aren't just spiritualists out here with credibility. They're both at a loss if they do not acknowledge the other, because we are at one, at our true core. It is in the realm of so-called mind that the great principle of separateness is found. So that's why the mental body, the mental nature, our intelligence is considered the lowest faculty of the spiritual being. Not that the mind is insignificant, because it's powerful and it's how we bring forth, or we birth the thought forms that we intuit from our creative nature. When we get in alignment, it's very important. But it's also where all separateness is found, because we distinguish and we act as a machine, and we separate things out so that we can understand them. But it's still important. It is in this realm of so-called mind that the great principle of separateness is found. It is also in the realm of mind that the great at-one-ment is made. Again, so just as easily as you can use your brain to distinguish and factor out and dismiss, you can also use it to lift your awareness, to grow even smarter, more intelligent, and more educated, more whole, by acknowledging this dual nature, to then move to the third stage of your monadic career, becoming more of the conscious creator in your life. You can use your mind to do that as well. The words of the initiate Paul have here a fitting place, wherein he says, quote, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ. Let Christ be an example. Another place that Christ had made, quote, or Paul said in another place, quote, in himself of twain, one new man. I'm butchering that. Let's read it all together again so it makes better sense. The words of the initiate Paul have here a fitting place, wherein he says, quote, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ, and adds in another place that Christ had made, quote, in himself of twain, one new man. Twain back in the day meant two. So Christ made in himself of two, one new man. This is all throughout Scripture, where it talks about the kingdom of God being within you, about how Christ was the Son of God, Son, S-O-N, synonymous with S-U-N, the New Testament being very analogous to astrology, which then it later on in that same book tells you to renounce astrology, again, put the feminine to sleep so that you can be controlled by facts and figures and not trust your spiritual self. But Christ was the example. Christ was able to perfect his mind, which it's telling you to do through these teachings. And in doing so, you made from yourself, from two beings, into one new man. That's unity consciousness, Christ consciousness, awakening the sleep side of you to integrate and elevate your soul to live as a soul. It is through the mind that theory is formulated, truth distinguished, and deity apprehended. When we are more advanced upon the path, we shall see naught but spirit everywhere. And the aphorism enunciated by that great disciple, HPB, Helm Blavatsky, that matter is spirit at the lowest point of its cyclic activity. Matter, us being physical, is the lowest point of spiritual activity, but in spirit is matter on the seventh plane, or the highest. This will be realized as a fact in our consciousness. I really don't feel like I'm making this clear because I'm all over the place. I'll try and take a second, but I hope you're following, because this is really important. I'll read it again. When we are more advanced upon the path, we shall see nothing but spirit everywhere. And the aphorism enunciated by that great disciple, HPB, that matter is spirit at the lowest point of its cyclic activity, and spirit is matter on the seventh plane, or the highest, will be a realized fact in our consciousness. So neither is unimportant. They're both just opposite sides of the coin. Spirit can lower itself. Lord, the Lord can come down. Christed consciousness can come down to the physical plane. The spiritual can come down here to the physical and illuminate so that the matter plane can come up to the level of spirit and then be the highest also level of spiritual matter. You can be a powerful physical being if you allow yourself to be at one with the spiritual essence of you that comes down, and then to live as that expression of the creative force or your soul, which is in you, dormant in the first stage of your monadic career, awakened in that second where you become aware of the dual nature, enhanced in that third where you become nothing but consciousness, aware of yourself, your soul, who you are, and your power from stepping down that consciousness into this physicality, and then to do what you're meant to do in this physical realm. But you can only do that by integrating and becoming first aware, the career. So one is not lesser than the other. They're just two aspects of the same whole, which need each other in order to do the work, which is the great work of the masters, which we're learning about here. To manifest heaven on earth, to integrate Christ consciousness, all of these things. You see, it actually makes more concrete sense when you're in the face of the world stage right now and what's going on. I'm not going to get into all that. It is as yet but an intellectual phrase, which means little except the enunciation of a truth incapable of proof to the left brain thinker. Prove it. We do, and every day. And as someone who lives from their north node, who walks in that flow, who understands universal laws and amplifies his existence or her to this magnificent state, the magi, the magician, the magnificence of the anointed, Christed consciousness being, that's your proof. But we don't acknowledge it because it's not in a book, it's not a science thing. We're learning to not distinguish between the two, but to let the life of the spiritual person, and not that warped or distorted version of spirituality, which means like a religious person has to live a lowly life or to be sacrificial, to not, have and be great. It's not about that. And it's not about the false physical perception of what a person is that is great, which is just rich and famous. That's not. It's neither of those. It's the truth that comes within the middle of all of this stuff. I hope that makes sense. Trust that makes sense. Everything is an expression of a spiritual consciousness which spiritualizes by its inherent life all matter forms. A grub or worm working out its little life in a mass of decaying substance is as much a spiritual manifestation as the initiate working out his destiny in a mass of rapidly changing human forms. It is all manifested deity. It is all divine expression, and all a form of sensitive awareness and of a response to environment, and therefore a form of conscious expression. The seven rays are the first differentiation of the divine triplicity of spirit consciousness form, and they provide the entire field of expression for the manifested deity. We are told in the scriptures of the world that the interplay, or the relation between Father, Spirit, and Mother, and matter, produces eventually, sorry, I read that wrong. We are told in the scriptures of the world that the interplay, or the relation between Father Spirit and Mother Matter, produces eventually a third, which is the Son, or the consciousness aspect. That Son, the product of the two, is esoterically defined as, quote, the one who was third but is second. The reason for this wording is that there first existed the two divine aspects, spirit matter, or matter impregnated with life. And it was only when these two realized their mutual unity, note the necessary ambiguity of that phrase, that the sun emerged. The esotericist, however, regards spirit matter as the first unity, and the sun, therefore, is the second factor. This sun, who is divine life incarnate in matter, and consequently the producer of the diversity and immensity of forms, is the embodiment of divine quality, the expression of divine quality, and embodiment in physical form. We might therefore utilize, for the sake of clarity, the term life quality appearance as interchangeable with the more usual trinity of spirit, soul, body, or life consciousness form. I shall utilize the word life when referring to spirit, to energy, to the Father, to the first aspect of divinity, and to the essential dynamic electric fire which produces all that is and is the sustaining, originating cause and source of all manifestation. So the Father, the first aspect of divinity, is life. I shall use the word appearance to express that which we call matter, or form, or objective expression. It is that illusory, tangible outer appearance which is animated by life, impregnated by life. This is the third aspect, the mother, overshadowed and fertilized by the Holy Ghost, or life, united with intelligent substance. This is fire by friction, a friction brought about by life and matter and their interplay, and producing change and constant mutation. That's appearance. Sorry, seeing how much more I have to go. Like 2 pages, 4 back and front. I shall use the word quality as expressive of the second aspect, the Son of God, the cosmic Christ incarnate in form, a form brought into being by the relation of spirit and matter. This interplay produces that psychological entity which we call the Christ. This cosmic Christ demonstrated to us his perfection as far as the human family is concerned through the medium of the historical Christ. This psychological entity can bring into functioning activity a quality within all human forms which esoterically can obliterate the forms and so engross the attention as to be regarded eventually as the main factor and as constituting all that is. This truth as to life and quality and form is made most clearly apparent to us in the story of the Christ of Galilee. He was constantly reminding the people that he was not what he appeared to be, neither was he the Father in heaven, and he is ever referred to by those who know and love him in terms of quality. He demonstrated to us the quality of the love of God, and in himself he embodied not only that which he had evolved of the 7 ray qualities, but also, as do few of the sons of God, a basic principle of the ray of the solar logos himself, the quality of love. This we shall study more closely when we take up the consideration of the 2nd ray of love wisdom. The 7 rays are therefore embodiments of 7 types of force which demonstrate to us the 7 qualities of deity, the Father, the One. The 7 qualities have consequently a 7-fold effect upon the matter and forms to be found in all parts of the universe, and have also a 7-fold interrelation between themselves. Life, quality, appearance are brought together into a synthesis, and in the manifested universe and in man incarnate, and the result of this synthesis is 7-fold, producing 7 types of qualified forms which emerge on all planes and in all kingdoms. It must be remembered that all the planes which we, from our little point of view, regard as formless are not really so. Our 7 planes are but the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. We shall not deal with the planes except in their relation to man's unfoldment, nor shall we deal with the macrocosm or with the developing life of the cosmic Christ. We shall confine our attention. This is basically just saying there's just so much more than this is so much vaster than this, but we're going to limit it down to our small point of view so that we can just get through living this life in the best way that we can. But understand that as above, so below, there's a higher, it still goes up the levels, larger and larger and larger to the divine expression, which the first divine expression would be that embodiment into those 7 planets. But there's more than that. So it's like it breaks, like I talked about spirituality, stepping itself down to lower itself down into physical form for a purpose. It's not just doing it because it thinks that physicality is pointless and is meaningless and is some insignificant thing. It had a purpose in expressing itself through the concrete and that which is in form. But in stepping itself down, it had to forget its all-encompassing nature in varying degrees. So it embodied aspects of itself in planetary logos, but not just our planets, because it's going to break it down in the second part of this. There's influences of these 7 rays within these larger bodies, which step itself down to influence the human being in a non-physical way, and all animals and plants and everything, not just humans, but we're talking about in terms of ourselves, our conscious evolution. We're influenced by these stepped down realms and aspects of consciousness until we can be sparked and lit up to remember ourselves as these aspects and integrate ourselves back up into our full embodied expanded form within our smallness, to be great within our smallness, if that makes sense. You have to first become aware of your greatness to then become great from your small nature, where certain religions would make you stay small, or certain understandings would make you stay small in relation to that greater thing, which you can never be and never equate to. That's only if you ignore your oneness with it. But then again, not to become that arrogant spiritualist like it warned us of in the other side, the glamour of it. Oh, I'm this God. Well, are you really? Are you acting as a God would? We have to check ourselves in that. So, continuing on.